Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong?
Okay, welcome back to Cinema's Marvellous Journey, episode 15, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is our deep dive into the entire history of the MCU. My name is Matt Waters. I'm the second half of the equation. I am joined by the anti-life equation that is Ben Phillips. Ben, how are you?
Are we doing a DC podcast now?
Yeah. That would be a much cleverer joke if it was brand appropriate. But still, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Got to work from home today because of awful trains, so I'm all ready for this.
Just the slightest bit of rain and London shuts down.
It wasn't even rain, it was just they just told us to go away.
Just go away. Go home.
Here's a different train station, figure your own way out, was basically what they said to us.
Indeed. Before we go any further, some breaking news related to Guardians of the Galaxy that will date this episode. Ronan the Accuser is coming back, everyone, despite overwhelming negative response. They will attempt to fix him, I guess. He will be in Captain Marvel alongside Phil Cheese Coulson, which is a lovely thing that's going to happen.
He's going to be unemployed in a few weeks, so it's all good.
That's true.
I mean, I'm going to say this, and then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.'s going to get renewed for Season 6, so I'm going to have to eat my words. But at the moment, I don't think it's going to get renewed, so...
I mean, if Disney want to do a streaming service, just put it exclusive to... just don't do things like this. So, Guardians 1 is in the past. It is time to talk about Guardians 2. Safe to say, one of the more anticipated superhero movies ever, because of the enormous groundswell, the way Guardians 1 entered into the zeitgeist. We yammered about it for 90 minutes on that episode, but people were late to the party. They realised it was so great. All the merchandise was selling in the meantime. Here's a sequel. Everyone shows up excited. I personally, somewhat disappointed. You're much higher on it than I am. I saw it for the second time in preparation for this. Weirdly, I've only seen most of the Phase 3 movies once each, except Doctor Strange, which I've somehow seen like 3 or 4 times now, somehow. They're both comedies, and I remember when I saw Guardians 1 for the second time, I thought, I don't like this as much, and I figured, well, comedy is never as good the second time around. But that first one has more consistency. I think the action's better, the core plot is better. I think the comedy is better, and while this has one of the most emotionally devastating moments in Marvel, I think the emotional stuff in the first one was better. So for me, this one just it just feels like more of a drop-off because that stuff is lacking and the comedy doesn't land as much for me. It's still, you're not bored by any stretch, and like it reminds me of Age of Ultron, where it's very, very messy, but it's also got some of the greatest individual moments in the MCU.
Yes, this movie, I've got very similar feelings to this movie that I do to Age of Ultron. Again, this is my second time watching it as well. So, like, I was going into it based on... I was very high on it when it came out the cinema, and then I sat with it for a little bit, and it kind of dropped a little bit. I actually think that this second viewing has improved my opinion on it somewhat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Awesome Mix Volume 2? I personally like it less, despite what James Gunn feels about it.
You'd left our old place of work, though.
That's true.
So I think I got the same level of subjection to it that I did the first one, so I viewed them very similarly and with a similar amount of affection.
This one is just full of bangers, and this one
has Mr. Blue Sky and The Chain.
Both amazing songs, but it also has Brandy, which is... I don't know how that got talked up as like the best song of all time, but...
I think that's part of the joke of that bit.
I'm not sure that's true. I think people genuinely feel that. I don't know, I don't dig the vibe of this one as much, but that is neither here nor there. Let's get into it. So, released May the 5th, 2017. It's crazy we're talking about movies that came out in 2017 in our like historical look back podcast.
It's been bumped up to the May release schedule, which is like the big date.
It's true. That's very true. The first one was a summer movie, and to me it doesn't make sense, but summer movies aren't really viewed as or I guess it's a certain part of the summer where they sort of dump things out, but anyway.
But yeah, like the May Marvel movie is always the big one. This is where both Avengers movies have gone, this is where Iron Man historically sat, this is where Civil War got to go.
It's where Infinity War's happening. So.
It's where Infinity War's
happening. Well, actually, no, just short of May, but yes. So, since Doctor Strange, we had the quite excellent Logan, which I believe you have finally watched.
I did.
Just under a year after its release.
Yeah, I did. I finally watched it. It was good.
That's all you get. It was good. That's your review.
There was 2017, good year for superhero movies. Shame we finished on quite a bum note.
Yeah. Just tried. There's only so much one man can do. So it's 137 minutes long, which makes it 14 minutes longer than the first one. And I ask you, to what effect, Ben? To what effect? I could easily identify 14 minutes of this that could have been tossed in the trash, but never mind. $200 million budget, which is $30 million less than the first one. I don't understand it. At first I thought maybe they built a bunch of tech that they just then reused, but they claim they rebuilt Rocket almost entirely. And there's a shot, or a whole sequence on Ego's planet that they claim to have 1 trillion polygons, which, if true, would be a record by quite some margin.
This sounds like the old 90s video game console setup things. So look at all the polygons the PlayStation's got. It's great.
We got so many microscopic triangles, bruh. It took $864 million. I'm actually pretty surprised it didn't make $1 billion, given the enthusiasm, because, I mean, while I found it disappointing in comparison to the first one, it still was reviewed well, and you know, people are still hyped for it, so...
It's a weird one where, like, I think Marvel had a few years there where every movie getting released in May made it to $1 billion, and then this one just didn't quite. It's hard to tell. I don't know whether or not word of mouth was slightly less good, because it made more money domestically and worldwide than the last one did, but it felt like...
Well, people knew Spider-Man was coming, so they were like, I'm going to save my movie dollars for that masterpiece. And they just ate into each other's profits. That's why neither of them made $1 billion. That's why it's 100% why I don't question it. James Gunn returns to direct and write. Nothing more to say there. We've covered his credentials. And it's a pretty straightforward production history. They announced this shortly before they released the first one. They revealed the title a year later. They locked everyone into contracts. They moved production from London to Atlanta, and they lost most of the crew to Doctor Strange, including their cinematographer. And yet, this is still a very beautiful movie. Adam Warlock was in early drafts. They removed him because it was too busy. James Gunn was frustrated that Fox own a whole bunch of space characters like Annihilus and Kang the Conqueror. Good luck explaining Kang the Conqueror in a movie, James. Ego got bought from Fox directly by Gunn. Marvel said, no, we don't have him. So Gunn contacted Fox, and he was like, please let me use Ego. And they brokered a deal in which they got to change Negasonic Teenage Warhead's entire character for Deadpool. I'm sure they thought that was a massive win, but hey, they got Ego out of it. No, she's cool in that movie. It's a very weird deal to make.
I mean, what does Fox really have to barter with? Like,
so they revealed ahead of time, somewhat surprisingly to some, that Ego was Peter's father. They didn't want to hinge a large point of the film on something that the audience was probably going to guess ahead of time, so they revealed that in trailers. And this is the highest testing Marvel film ever. Perfect 100, based on a test that they came up with for their own movies. But still, 100 is 100.
Deadpool 2 recently got a 98 on a similar test.
Similar, but different. That's literally all I got. There's nothing. The most juicy tidbit is that they, moved countries and lost most of their crew. You talked about the Guardians of the Galaxy, so you have some choices here. You can either talk about how that revamped comic did, that was more based on the movie tie-ins, or you can talk about Ego, the Celestials, Mantis. We have a whole bunch of new characters.
The original Guardians are in this movie.
They sure are.
They're a cameo. Should we do the cameos now, just because they're barely in it and they're in a post-credit scene? And
I mean, if you want, but Miley Cyrus demands at least 10 minutes of conversation.
Yes, she does. Yeah, so the original Guardians of the Galaxy, created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and all that lot, back in the 1960s, 70s, show up in this one. You've got Michael Rosenbaum as Martin X, Ving Rhames as Charlie 27, Michelle Yeoh as Aletta Ogord, Miley Cyrus as Mainframe. Crew Guard doesn't get a voice, I don't believe.
It's just a CGI character, yeah.
Just a CGI character, and of course you have Sylvester Stallone as Stakar Ogord, and then also Michael Rooker as Yondu, who was obviously in the first movie. So yeah, this is assembled the original Guardians of the Galaxy, who are from the future in the comic books, and had them as kind of earlier versions of a similar team in this universe who are Ravagers. I mean, we'll probably get more of them in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but it's just a fun little...
Is there a more than 1% chance they get their own film?
If they've received well in Guardians 3, maybe.
What if Marvel have got 19 films and they're like, that's not round enough, we'll have to just say 20 and we'll figure one out, and just right at the last minute, shit, we have to announce something today. Fuck
The
it.
Ravagers!
The Ravagers. Here's our film that sounds like it's about rapists. Sorry, go on.
Sean Gunn will star in it with his arrow.
That's real fun at the end. Sorry, go on.
And then, Ego, originally created for Thor comics by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Those names still coming up and will continue to come up forever and ever. Yeah, not originally a character from Guardians of the Galaxy, because Guardians of the Galaxy didn't really have many characters that originated. I don't actually know why Fox had the rights to it either, considering it was created for a Thor comic.
Well, these things are very strange.
And then Mantis came to fame in the 2008 Abnett and Lanning.
The Space Madonna.
The Space Madonna. She was created by Steve Englehart and Don Heck, but she was also part of the 2008 version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's kind of similar to everyone being confused why Ant-Man and Wasp weren't in Avengers. This is kind of that. Mantis was in that team, and so people were kind of scratching their heads why she wasn't.
Sure. And what's a Celestial in, 10 words? Living energy in the form of an armor that fucks around with life?
Yeah, pretty much. You can go for that one. I mean, we touched on Celestials in Guardians 1 when they had
you see one in the Collector's little montage about Infinity Stones, and also they go to the head of one.
Yes. And then in terms of the comic books, Brian Michael Bendis has done a job. It's fine. They've also spun off pretty much every single character. Everyone's got a 6 to 12 issue series about them. None of them stuck around for long. It's really weird. They just don't let any of them stick around. The best of the bunch is probably Scott Young's Rocket Raccoon, or Chip Zdarsky and Chris Anker's Star-Lord, which definitely check both of those out. The rest of them you can probably leave.
What about Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde, Ben?
That was a mini-series that they did exclusively during Secret Wars and isn't actually canonical.
I know, I was just testing you. So, this movie, the thing that first comes to mind when I think of this movie is the opening dance/fight number with Baby Groot to Mr. Blue Sky. I think that's such a clever little shot as he just moves through the foreground dancing around while this sort of intense battle with a giant squidpotous space monster unfolds. I like him waving at Gamora, and I love how aggressive he is towards all these tiny creatures, and then he goes back to being cute. That's a lot of fun. James Gunn had to provide an awful lot of motion capture for that. He did the dancing Groot in the end credits of the first one, and he said that was just him with an iPhone, and this was a full mocap suit for a whole day in front of 50 witnesses, and he was quite embarrassed. But it worked out pretty well, and my favourite shot in the movie, I would say.
Yeah, just taking that and springboarding, this movie looks so damn good.
Yeah.
It's so colourful, and the cinematography is just on point. I think Phase 3 is where we really start to get these really confidently looking movies. We already saw it with Doctor Strange, where the best thing about that movie is just it looks so damn good. And yeah, this movie just continues that tradition of I just want to look at it sometimes.
So many colours happening. The Squidpotous monster, it vomits rainbows as an attack. I don't understand how that's effective, but it looks good. A ton of fun. I like Drax thinking he can cut the monster open from the inside, and just Gamora generally in this movie, Zoe Saldana is very good at just being sick of all their shit. Just no, you idiot. Just don't.
I love the beat where she just repeats word for word what he said. And then, Quill just, interrupts her and says, that's dumb. And she goes, I know it's dumb.
Exactly. What? Skin is the same thickness from both. Yeah, and I also like Drax getting the name of those batteries wrong. And then he later repeats exactly his mistake. That's just a fun little beat. Baby Groot is the star of that little dance number. Let's talk about Baby Groot. How could we not? He is the merchandising juggernaut upon which an empire was built. Vin Diesel is back as Baby Groot. He performed all of his lines in 16 additional languages, up from 6 from the last time, which is crazy. He got his own special version of the script, which translated all of Groot's lines for him, so he knew how to read them. That's cute as hell. Gunn assumed that Marvel wouldn't be cool with having him be Baby Groot for the entire film, because Groot was the most popular character the first time. He's an idiot. Of course they want a cuter version. Think of the toys, man. We should point out, this is not the original Groot reborn or regrown. This is his son. That Groot is dead. He is dead, children. He must have learned about Drax's character very, very quickly, because he continues to freeze when Drax looks at him because he knows Drax hates dancing. So, Baby Groot is disgustingly cute. Literally, one of the funniest things in the film is him vomiting. It's cute.
I love how this movie flips between him being adorable and really dark, though.
I love how much he's yelling whenever he attacks anything, but he's just so tiny.
But he also drops a man to his death.
He does.
It's just a lovely juxtaposition between the adorableness and the character from the first movie, and I really.
It's a lot like that scene where he murders all those dudes in that hallway and then turns around and does the big smile.
Yeah, it's more of that, but even more of a juxtaposition, which, yes. appreciated.
I think of him sitting there in a chair, which is too big for him, eating little candy beans. I think of him bringing them all the wrong objects when he's trying to bring them the big fin, including a desk and an eye, which is
and a toe. I hope you have a refrigerator full of toes.
Nope.
No.
Let's never speak of this again. Yeah, he's so cute. The little scene near the end, he's got the two buttons, which one are you going to press? And he points to the wrong one repeatedly. I really wish that wasn't in every single trailer and that I didn't see that trailer 9 million times, because while that is very funny and cute, ruined when I saw the real thing. Except the tape thing. The tape thing was very funny, with Peter flying around from person to person.
I actually think it's edited better in the trailer, though. It's just a bit snappier.
It is snappier, for sure.
It's nice that they saved a lot of the beats for the movie, but it's still one of those things where it's just like, we know how this ends, and now I'm just kind of waiting to get to the point where the plot's going to progress again, even though I am enjoying the tape bit in the moment.
He doesn't yell, "I am Groot," as he's running away, though, does he?
He doesn't.
We, of course, end the movie with Teenage Groot, which I had really, really sincerely hoped was going to be a one-time gag, but no, he is Teenage Groot in the next film.
I don't think it'll be played up as much as like him being surly and stuff like that. It'll be more like, when they say Teenage Groot, he'll be like 18, 19-year-old Teenage Groot who's actually like a responsible in some way.
Okay, he better be.
I just can't imagine them going an entire movie of like, the world is ending, Thanos is coming, and then Groot sat there being like,
I am Groot.
Yeah, I don't think they do that.
I just want him to be a smaller adult Groot, essentially.
I mean, he's going on an adventure with Thor and Rocket, so
yeah, he'll do stuff.
He'll do stuff. I'm sure that part of the movie is going to be a lot of fun.
Groot's great. I was really worried going into it that he was going to be far too much, and it's good. It's all good stuff. Like, they go to him a lot, and they clearly spent so much money making him look cute. So, the reason they were on this little mission, to fighting the squid thing, is for the Sovereign, who are lame. Yeah. Say it with me, they are lame. They are big, gold, perfect people. They take a lot of time away from the film without really offering much more than... They're a plot device for the Guardians to meet Ego, and you get the final moment with Adam Warlock, and that's really it. Although it gets a nice little Farscape moment into film, so that makes my heart happy. Elizabeth Debicki plays Aisha, a character I had never heard of before this, and then they were like, yeah, she's the villain, because they were being a little bit hush-hush with Ego at one point. So she is 6'3", and I really wish you could tell that, because she spends the entire film sitting down.
Yep. Oh god, the Sovereign is so weird. Like, I appreciate what they do in terms of, like, I appreciate that in the final fight they kind of add an extra level of danger where you actually think they're the wrinkle rather than like a big superhero fight. I appreciate that, but oh my god, I just think that a lot of the comedic beats of them fall flat.
Yeah.
Because they are pretty much, most of them, there for comic relief. The one beat that I like is the guy who makes it through the temporal asteroid field, and then he gets blown up at the end, and then they're all just like, oh god, you're the worst.
But he's the last one alive. How does he suffer?
Yeah, you guys all died ages ago because you all stood around his ship, and you were telling...
One of them looks a bit like Crispin Glover. There you go, seamless podcast. You think about it, like, after that little wonderful little opening number, it's not until like minute 20 of the film where you give a shit about anything that's really happening, and a lot of that is down to the Sovereign. And when I was saying how this movie is 14 minutes longer, but for what? I wonder if maybe we could have just lost the Sovereign. But then again, they are a logical way to bring in Adam Warlock, who is teased at the end of the movie. These people are all gold-skinned. Adam Warlock is famously gold-skinned. We got the sort of Easter egg with his cocoon in the first one, which it now is not his cocoon.
You say this is a logical way to introduce... Well, yeah, but they already had a logical way to introduce him.
They did, but they had these gold people that like you don't give a shit about, and then it's like, oh wait, a character you might give a shit about. Marvel weren't happy that James Gunn did this because they thought audiences would expect him to appear in Infinity War, because obviously that character plays a huge role in the whole Infinity saga, but audiences did not think that, and James Gunn was still was forced to make it all clear on Twitter. But hey, the Sovereign kind of suck. Who does not suck, though? Rocket Raccoon and Yondu. I've kind of identified as pairs of characters, and this will bleed into our next sort of bit. But Bradley Cooper is back as Rocket, not Raccoon, just Rocket. He did some face capture this time, which he did not the first time. He looks really, really good. You get kind of lost in like the goofiness of everything and the comedy, but if you just actually stop and appreciate how fucking good this CGI raccoon looks, it's pretty insane. Huge fan of him being called Trash Panda, Triangle-Faced Monkey, and a Crabby Puppy.
You forgot the best one, Raboon.
Raboon is also good.
I like them all, but I just think Groot saying, like, I'm not a Raboon.
So Rocket's whole arc in this one is he was kind of the asshole that didn't want to work with anyone, was quite difficult in the first one. We got the reasons why. We saw him get drunk and like refer to himself as a monster. All really, really good stuff. And then it ends in a like, hey, we're a team now, and it's like he's had a chance to rethink it and he's pushing back. And I don't know, I find him a bit too obnoxious in how much of an asshole he has to be. And even when he's just doing the comedy stuff, like how hard he laughs at Taserface, it's like, okay, you're laughing a bit too hard. This has gotten a bit hammy, but it sure is fun when he fights all those Ravagers, using all his gadgets and just absolutely fucking them up. And then my favourite is when he gets trapped by two of them and they're like, you're not so tough now, are you? And then he just kicks both their asses unarmed even.
Rocket is really good. Sean Gunn and Bradley Cooper together doing this are just, I think it's very much like in sync and works stupidly well.
Yeah.
And I also agree that the Taserface bit goes on a bit too long. I think the payoff for it works.
Yes.
But it's still one of those things where it's just like, I get that Rocket laughs hard, but in that moment it felt like could have shaved off about 5 seconds of that and we would have preserved it a bit more. Or it was more like him insulting them and then the Ravagers laughing at Rocket, kind of ripping him to shreds. Again, it plays off the first movie where like someone says that his laugh is fake and he says it's real.
True.
But it does feel fake in this one. But like again, like I cannot fault pretty much anything else.
He's good at a lot of the quieter moments, like when we just talked about it, you know, the scene where Groot keeps bringing them objects and he's just sort of talking very quietly, and I think there's a lot of good stuff there. And I really like the line near the end when, you know, this whole bomb thing, Peter asks him something, he's like, on the off chance that Groot doesn't kill us all, this is what you have to do, because he's got zero faith that plan is going to go well.
I was about to say, I think Rocket is the emotional core of this movie, and then I went through my head and said, like, no, like a lot of these characters hold a lot of emotional weight. I do think Rocket and Yondu are the two strongest kind of emotional cores at the heart of this movie. They managed to give everyone an emotional plotline, but I think Rocket, with his coming to terms with how much of an arsehole he is, I think plays super well, and his bonding with Yondu, especially like their conversation where they have the argument at the very end about the similarities between the two of them in the way that they're arseholes, is tremendous in so many ways.
And then Rocket seeing it all come good for Yondu and, like, you know, forgetting that he's supposed to be talking about Yondu or whatever, coming to terms with the fact that he's in this team and these people are not going to abandon him. All good stuff. I also really like that when the Ravagers have him, he's like, you know, just don't hurt Groot and whatever, like, because he is always going to be his buddy, and we have that flip of the dynamic where Groot was his bodyguard to now he is the one having to protect tiny Groot, although we can see Groot can handle himself when he needs to. I kind of want to move Yondu into the next little bit, but I sort of put this here for some reason. The scene where he gets the fin and gets the arrow back and just murders all these Ravagers. They really spent some money on that, didn't they? Because there are a lot of crazy arrow effect. I really like when the lights go out and you see it moving and it's like really lit up red and all that stuff, and it makes Yondu look like his classic appearance.
I adore that scene. The bit where the camera goes up and you see them in the middle of Rocket shooting his guns and the arrows just going everywhere and it looks like his practical set is just...
Yeah, it was a practical set.
Was it a practical set?
They built a 360-degree movable set for the ship, despite how much CG there was. James Gunn was very adamant about having as many practical sets as possible. A big fan of that. In the Firefly Now, Serenity Later podcast that Mike and I did, we talked up what a great decision it was to have the ship be a real feeling space, because it was a space you could move around, and that really helped ground it all. So the reason I wanted to move Michael Rooker forward a tiny bit is because there is a ton of really cool stuff about the Ravagers in this from every angle. And it's one of the things that Gunn was talking about wanting to flesh out in this one. He wanted to flesh out Drax, the Collector, the Ravagers, and someone else I can't remember. And basically all of that didn't happen except for the Ravagers. We get some cool stuff with their background, their sort of code of ethics, their customs, the meaning behind the costume. But let's talk about Michael Rooker as Yondu. Wonderful. So much better than almost everyone else in this movie, in my opinion. It's not that he wasn't good in the first one, it's just we see a completely different side from him here, because we see that he's been ostracised from most of the Ravagers, who we've thought of as just this crew of dirtbags, sort of space pirate type people, and it turns out there's a bit more of a sort of honor system to them. He was cast out for smuggling children, which they're not cool with. Even criminals have a line, apparently. He's just so good. It's a more serious take on the character. Like, the very first shot we see him, he's standing shirtless in ostensibly a brothel.
Ostensibly?
A brothel. With, like, robot ladies, but, he gets down how he gets down. Don't kink shame people. It makes him look very vulnerable as he stands there shirtless and all blue. It's effective. And then, you see him looking all sad panda when he is rejected by Sylvester Stallone's character. That little scene on this snowy planet, I think that's so effective straight away in fleshing out the Ravagers infinitely more than they were in the first one.
Yeah, it also helps that they've actually cast some relatively recognisable people for him to interact with. Like, you've got Sean Gunn from the first movie, but then you've also got Mickey Flanagan from Sons of Anarchy, Chris Sullivan from The Nick, and lots of little tiny things. Just kind of to flesh out the Ravagers, so they're not just...
Yeah, there's more Ravagers that you can sort of identify by face than the last time, where it was Sean Gunn and the others.
Did I say Mickey Flanagan?
You did.
I meant Tommy Flanagan.
Tommy Flanagan from
Tommy Flanagan from Sons of Anarchy. Mickey Flanagan, someone that only UK listeners will get.
And America, don't Google him. It won't help stereotypes. It really won't. Fun fact, Michael Rooker visited the set of Infinity War a whole bunch to hide the fact that he super dies in this movie. That's commitment to your character. I like how much he contrasts with the rest of his crew when they are there to sort of capture the Guardians, and he's like, well, we're not this stupid, we're just going to sell these things. It's very clear what they're going for with him, but it's an effective way of not completely doing a 180 on his character while still sort of separating him out from the others. He does die, but before he does, he says the immortal line, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all." He's sort of holding his arrow and floating down inside the planet. Wonderful stuff.
Which apparently he's not allowed to sign.
Aww.
If he does signings, he's not allowed to write "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all," Michael Rooker.
Have you seen the picture of someone at some sort of convention did a cosplay mashup of Mary Poppins and Yondu, and he took many, many pictures with them?
Yes, I have. Yeah. It's wonderful. I also want to call attention to his "he might have been your father, but I'm your daddy" line,
yes,
which...
so good. Such a gut punch. Tears, man, as Yondu died. And then, of course, we've got one jetpack and one spacesuit. Yondu puts on the jetpack, puts the spacesuit around Peter, and gets him out of the planet and dies, saving him. And Peter literally loses both his dads in the space of 20 seconds. So powerful, that death scene, and the response to it. The funeral scene gets me every single time. He gets the Ravager funeral after Starhawk, distinct from Star-Lord, Sylvester Stallone's character, sort of admonishes him and says, you are not going to get flames, you're not going to get all this stuff that I can't remember, this sci-fi mumbo-jumbo. And then he gets it all at the end. They all show up and give him the funeral. And Sean Gunn's little, him yelling and, hitting the Ravager symbol, you really feel that he is so elated for his longtime captain, and Peter recognises the significance of it. It's all just so good. And you see, his ashes, become the arrow. It's a little bit too cutesy, but there's so much going on screen that it's fine. Fun fact, he fell asleep filming his little eulogy scene. And the choice of Cat Stevens playing over there. And my mother's favourite song. So, there you go, everyone. That is such a good choice. That fits that scene so beautifully. Seeing Peter sit there listening to it next to Groot, who reaches for one of the headphones. So good. Probably gonna, before this is all said and done, say some bad things about the back stretch of this movie, but this is definitely not a bad thing. A very emotional moment, as I said, one of the nicest moments in the entire MCU.
Everything with Michael Rooker in this movie is great. Is some of the best stuff that they've done. I think it helps that to elevate it in my mind is that Rocket and Yondu come off the best in this movie, and they spend an awful lot of the time in it together.
Well, we see Yondu graduate from who he is in the first one to he's a dejected outcast who has some issues with pride, where he's clearly he becomes meek around them. And he's like, oh, hey guys, almost. And then when they walk away from him, he then doubles down on the anger and yells at them, and then he gets to be the badass when he's the one that stops Rocket after he's kicked all his men's asses. And then he's the dejected prisoner who's just sitting there silently as they murder his crew. And he gets to be the teacher. He gets to do so much. And then he gets to be Mary Poppins, and then he gets to die.
He also gets to join the mother frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy.
He does. That team, that should have been the one. It's a shame it's the end of it, but it's what had to be done.
It says a lot that in the MCU, I think we're at really two characters now who have had an impact with their death. It's Coulson and it's Yondu. In terms of they've appeared in multiple movies and their deaths actually feel like a payoff to something. But these two deaths work better than Quicksilver's death in Age of Ultron. They work better than any of the myriad villain deaths, mentor deaths that you get in other things. It's weird that Marvel is doing so much so well in terms of building up a cohesive universe, and we've really only had a few movies so far that have felt like they've got interlocking elements that make them feel like part of a bigger whole, or like there are characters who are expendable or like could die. Like there's not that tension that you get, but when they have done it, it's worked really, really well.
Yeah, we'll see if they can do something similar with Infinity War. They've said characters may die, but it seems to make logical sense for some characters to die. We'll see if it plays out the same way there.
We will see if it plays out in this movie, or we've got to wait 12 months to see if they die, but who knows? Well, that movie is literally a mystery.
So Taserface, Chris Sullivan. I found it all reasonably funny the first time on rewatch. I was like, okay, yeah, he's called Taserface. Gunn included him in the movie essentially because he thinks the name is so incredibly dumb. I think at one point he said he would never include him, and then because he felt so strongly about it, he was like, actually, that might be quite funny, so he put him in.
If you're going to take anything from the 1990s Guardians of the Galaxy series, Taserface, and then taking the piss out of Taserface is definitely the best way to go about it.
Marvel aren't too proud. Like, fuck it, make fun of our silly characters. There's a lot of dumb shit in comic book movies.
We haven't had enough taking the piss out of 90s comics yet. Deadpool's ignoring the ludicrous nature of like how he was in the 90s, and I hope we get more of that in Deadpool 2, is the idea that this movie is starring fucking Deadpool and Cable, two characters who symbolise almost the entire downfall of Marvel Comics in the 90s, and they're going to be in a movie together. And
Fox's last ride. The last film Fox can get out on release date. Dark Phoenix has been delayed, everyone.
That's dating us.
Well, to the surprise of literally no one. He talked about the whole laughing at Taserface by Rocket thing. I really like that his last moment is a member of the Sovereign laughing at him when he says his name. That's just a good way. And then he's like, ugh, and then dies.
Yeah, that's the second good beat for a member of the Sovereign.
Yes. Oh, I forgot. He says that Groot is too adorable to kill. I think that's wonderful. He's like so gruff and violent and like not at all a rip-off of a Klingon, although I know he is a character of his own right. From a race of aliens that worship Tony Stark because one of his pieces of tech crash-landed on their planet. Sean Gunn back as Kraglin in a massively expanded version of this character. In my opinion, the only real threat to Michael Rooker as the best actor in this film. It's just really good. Like, it's very honest. Like, when he reluctantly mutinies and then immediately regrets it, and it's played with a real sort of earnestness. And like I said, that moment when he celebrates Yondu getting the funeral, and I think he's got good chemistry with Nebula when he's...
Yeah, this is one of those characters who, like, the Marvel Cinematic has managed to take and make into its own thing. He's barely a thing in the comic books, and the comic books have had to turn him into something. It's very similar to Coulson, although that is kind of more of an original thing. Like, this is one of the few moments where the MCU feels like it's actually building something unique rather than taking from the comics and changing, whereas this is a whole new character who has to be reinserted back into the world in which they nominally took him from.
Okay, let's talk about the actual star of this movie, I guess, 40 minutes in or whatever. So let's talk about Peter and his father. So Chris Pratt is back as Star-Lord, kind of more of the same, in my opinion. It's not as good, but not to say it's bad. It's just, I don't know, we've kind of seen the gimmick of him meeting them all for the first time. It's fun seeing him be this not amazing leader. I like that the film kicks off 2 months after the first one rather than years. Like, they're still pretty new at being a team, and they ultimately succeed, but it's not all smooth. And seeing Peter be this kind of, the figurehead of them and do the talking for them, I think all of that stuff works pretty well. But just overall, I don't know, I think it's not as sort of star... Well, he's already a star, so of course it isn't as star-making, but it's just not that same kind of look-at-me performance.
It's interesting that since Guardians of the Galaxy's come out, he had Lego Movie that year, but that was still very much a voice role. But since then, Jurassic World, Magnificent Seven, and Passengers have all come out. So Chris Pratt has become fairly ubiquitous at this point in terms of these. So it's like, I'm not as surprised as I was. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy felt like I was coming out of Parks and Recreation and being like, oh my god, what on earth is this? Whereas this is like, oh yeah, it's Chris Pratt, and he's doing his Chris Pratt stick. Admittedly, he's doing it better than he was doing it in any of the three other movies. But,
yeah, I just feel he's in that. I know it's balanced, but in that first one, he is the main character. He's sort of the the viewpoint of the audience, and in this one he's very much not the main character, and we leave him alone for extended periods of time, so it just isn't as impactful a performance for me. Not to say he doesn't have, some nice moments, not to say he doesn't do some nice acting, but that will come up in other sections.
Yeah, I mean, like the last shot of this movie is Rocket shedding a tear at Yondu's funeral. Yes, Chris Pratt gets to do the emotion of like watching Yondu freeze to death in space in front of him, but this does feel like more of an ensemble movie, sometimes to its detriment.
Yes. Kurt Russell plays his dad, Ego, the living planet. When I heard this casting and then you see him as a human-looking man, I was like, pretty sure Ego's just like a giant planet with a face on it and a mustache and stuff, but okay. They retool it slightly. Matthew McConaughey turned this down to do Dark Tower. Sure, he regrets it. Also considered
I wish that movie was good.
I know, right? But also considered for this movie Gary Oldman, who Marvel are really determined to cast. He keeps coming up. Viggo Mortensen, Christoph Waltz, Christopher Plummer, Max von Sydow, Alec Baldwin, that would be fun, Ron Perlman, Stephen Lang, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Robert De Niro, Michael Biehn. They've really got a theme here. Mel Gibson and Liam Neeson. Yeah, it would have been fun to see an 80s action star as his dad. But we get Kurt Russell, so we do have that.
We do have an 80s action star.
We have Kate Hudson's stepdad, everyone. Kurt Russell, I think he's good until he starts doing the generic sci-fi villain monologue about, I'll be everything, and then it turns into what it turns into. But before that, when he's just being this quite aloof character, interacting with Peter and all that stuff, I think it's all pretty good stuff. It's not that he's like an Oscar-winning actor or anything, but it kind of feels weird seeing someone like him in a role like this, and I think he performs it pretty well.
Yeah, I think Kurt Russell is really good. Again, like, we got a theme with these Phase 3 villains where I don't think any of the Phase 3 villains are bad. Like, they're not bad in the same way that some of the Phase 2 villains are, but there's a level of quality to them that I appreciate. Like, they're trying different things, and yes, this movie does devolve into superhero slugfest by the end. They're trying for some emotional beats in here, which I really appreciate. I cannot get over how much I fucking love the beat where he has Quill hypnotized and he starts monologuing, and then he's just like, and that's why I had to put the tumor in her head.
Yeah, and then Peter immediately snaps out of it.
That might be my favorite beat in the whole movie, is just this beat where he says all these things about like abandoning your friends and how you become immortal and stuff like that, and Quill goes along with it, and then the moment he finds out that this is the person that killed his mother, he's just like, no, fuck you, I'm done.
How very Tony Stark of him.
Yes, it is pretty much the same beat from Civil War, but even here, I think just like the way the camera pans on him and you see the eyes go away, and he just brings out both guns and blasts the shit out of Ego is just really good.
Oh yeah, and it's really violent as well.
Yeah.
And I really like, because he also destroys his cassette player, and I like that he goes, you shouldn't have killed my mum and broke my Walkman. It's like, those two things in most universes are not of equal importance, but given what this means to him and tied into his mother, it works really well. Why does Ego have like a sex museum slideshow in his house? It's pretty weird. I assume he's like generating that on the fly, and it's not just there just in case someone pops by and wants to know his backstory. But
no, it's his giant spank bank.
I do think it's pretty funny that he's still wearing the like Earthman 80s outfit while he's banging all these aliens on the screen. Oh yeah, they DH him at the beginning. It continues to be an effective use of CG. I kind of have a bone to pick with this because it makes sense to show him with Peter's mother at the beginning, but we also see this thing with the seed he's left on the planet, and when it all starts going to shit near the end, it cuts back to Earth, and like this huge nebulous mess starts overrunning Missouri, which is where Star-Lord is originally from. It just seems really unnecessary.
Yeah,
every time they cut back to it. And like, you see Peter's grandfather, he's driving the big pickup truck. That's why they linger on this random old man for so long. I didn't pick up on that, but it is in fact his grandfather from the first movie. But it just felt completely unnecessary.
Yeah, it's like, for a movie that is so thoroughly indebted to space, the brief sojourn back to Earth feels really weird. Like, we've got no emotional ties to it, really. If anything, I'd rather it be a montage of other planets, of other things we've seen. Like, maybe there's one on Xandar, and we get to see Glenn Close for a brief second or something like that. Like, that feels like more.
She filmed scenes, they got cut. We do see a bit of that, and we see the planet of Korg's race from Ragnarok that they're shown, and like the woman with the baby and stuff like that. But yeah, just every time it cuts back to Earth, it's like, oh, the thing's expanding again. Oh, it froze again. It just It took
Especially
because
because there's no commentary on it in any other movies. Because we've had nothing really set on Earth afterwards, there's no one to kind of go like, oh, and then the weird thing that happened in Missouri. Like,
yeah, are they going to take 2 minutes out of Infinity War to be like, wait, that was you guys?
I mean, I got no idea. What other movie released last year did it remind you of, Matt?
Power Rangers. Is that what you were thinking of? Because
It was what I was thinking of.
Because while we were watching it last night, I started saying Krispy Kreme under my breath, and I got a very strange look. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's so weird that those two movies have pretty much the exact same beat.
The whole like utopia that turns out to have a dark underbelly or whatever, that is a classic sci-fi beat. I appreciate they did that. Like, I'm down with everything that's happening up until it turns into total garbage. We get just 2 CGI action figures smushing into each other. Peter turns into Pac-Man in a thing that Ben is just overjoyed about. Your favourite thing in the film, other than he reveals he gave his mum a brain tumour, right?
I get what they're going for. They're going for, this is a child of the 80s taken away, and so he's always going to regress to this moment of childhood, yada, yada, yada. But we've not had any, apart from one line in this movie, any implication that Peter Quill holds Pac-Man to any, like, esteem. It just feels weird. Like, it feels like it's a cultural reference for the sake of a cultural reference, so they can use the sound effect and get people to kind of... It's the Ready Player One effect. Like, it's a reference for the sake of a reference, whereas the more emotional beat would be in the scene where he turns into Pac-Man, if he turned into the Milano, if he turned into his mother, Yondu's arrow or something. Like, something that has some emotional significance to what's happening, rather than a figure from the 80s. Even Mario would make more fucking sense than Pac-Man.
The Milano would have been pretty cool, actually.
Something he has a tie to.
Yeah. Ego's car he's driving at the beginning of the film, and not only is that James Gunn's license plate from when he was in high school, that car has the exact same colour scheme as the Milano. Fun little detail literally no one would notice. David Hasselhoff cameos in this movie. I really like...
Nice.
Yes, I really like Gamora getting his name wrong. You told me of Zardu Hasselfrau and his magic boat, and I don't like that that's genuinely her favourite story of his. Yeah, the Hoff appears, digitally replaced almost entirely because it didn't work, but, you know, he technically filmed a scene, and he's technically in the film twice. That's kind of fun. But I just can't get away from this awful fight. When we talk about Marvel movies having problems with their third act and problems with their villains, this is like the thing that comes to mind. And like DC do it more, but just for some reason this is the one that comes to me, of just obvious CG characters just flying towards each other with rampant destruction and no consequences. And
to
end this with that.
Yeah, I don't think it gets as bad as quickly as you do. Like, I actually enjoy a lot of the stuff that goes on down below, because a lot of it is based around emotional revelations for the characters.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, like, around it, and I love when the chain starts playing again, and, like, you get the big money shot of the entire team standing together, and as you said to me before this, what I do is I just steal all your points. You tell me things, and then I use them on air before you can say them. There should be a lot more of, like, all of them standing together, because it's pretty cool. I don't know, it just really bothers me that this doesn't seem the kind of movie to boil down, or this sub-franchise doesn't seem the kind of thing that's going to come down to this sort of stuff. It doesn't seem very them. But then again, I suppose having Peter be like a half god doesn't really seem very them, and they did that, so this is how it plays out.
Yeah, I just think like it's only 5 minutes. It's not as egregious as when Wonder Woman becomes something that it's not. I do think it's relatively unobtrusive. I like that Mantis keeps them at bay for a good chunk of the final act. See,
to me, that should have been like, if not the very final moment, it should have been one of the final moments. It should have boiled down to her standing up to him, and then Groot sets off the bomb. I know it isn't Peter that kills him. He just sort of keeps him busy, but it just bothers me. It just does.
It's fair enough. It isn't the best done part, but I definitely think it bothers me less because I appreciate a lot of the stuff going on around it. I like that all the disparate elements of the movie come together in this final part. I just wish that all they weren't disparate parts of the movie. And we're now getting on to the 2 parts that I think suffer the most from having to be kind of like cordoned off into their own little corner of the movie.
For me, one of the most powerful things in this film is when Peter, he has all those flashbacks in his head and the music cuts out, and in pure silence, in a movie that is 2 movies that are very noisy, have loads of music, have loads of sound effects, to have this pure silence, and he has these flashbacks of listening to music with his mum, dancing with Gamora, hanging out with Drax, flying around with Rocket, and the one that really gets me, learning to shoot the gun with Yondu. They bring back the kid that played him in the first one, and just it's like 2 seconds long, if that, and it just really pairs well with everything they were doing before, and that, you know, he may be your father, but he ain't your daddy, and all that. I think that shot is absolute dynamite. We mentioned Mantis, so let's move on to Mantis and Drax. Pom Klementieff, as Mantis. One of the creators of Mantis was not happy with this portrayal. She is a lot more kind of comic relief. I don't dislike it. It's funny that she's got no experience with emotional interaction, which is why she pairs well with Drax, who is socially interesting. Let's put it that way. While I don't dislike it, I do slightly prefer the comic version, or at least the take that I've read the most, which is in that Guardians run you mentioned. It's kind of like, is she crazy? I just kind of prefer that to what they go for here. The whole scene with her reading people's emotions, again, they put it in the trailer. So it just doesn't really work for me as well when I see it, and her like revealing that Peter loves Gamora and all that. I do like the beat that Gamora doesn't want her to do it to her, and then when she does it inadvertently later and reveals she's scared, that all plays really well.
I think Pom Klementif is a total joy in this movie.
I would like to see more of her. I'm glad she's going to be in Infinity War. I'm glad that she's going to be part of this team. It's just, I feel they lent really heavily on these scenes that they gave away.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that thing where, like, I think she works best when she's reacting to other things. Everything with her and Rocket is great. She wants to pet Rocket, and she starts giggling at him later on in the movie and stuff like that. I think she is a very similar role to what Drax had in the first movie, which is just him interacting with things that are out of his wheelhouse is funny, and I think it carries over into this one. It's just a shame that they put the two characters who interestingly react to things going on around them and pretty much exclusively have them do that together. And again, the emotional beat at the end where it comes to Drax turning to her and saying, "You're beautiful," and then undercut it with "on the inside."
Because we have this recurring joke where he keeps telling her she's so ugly and everything. One of the few things that I find funny about Drax in this movie, because Dave Bautista is back as Drax, he's just playing for laughs in this one, in my opinion, in a way he isn't in the first one, where he is, within the universe, he is just a serious character, and his reactions are funny. We find him funny, but it's like they were writing him intentionally to be the funny one-liner man in this one, and I just find a lot of it just did not land for me at all.
Yeah, like the nipples bit, I don't think that plays. I get that they set it up and they want to pay it off. I just wish they did neither. Like, they had just set it up and never paid it off, because the little, "oh, my nipples."
The thing I said at the beginning with the batteries, I find that way funnier than any of these things, like the gross out humour. He's like, where he's pretending to vomit and all of that. I think he works better around people like Peter than he does, as you said, around Mantis, because it's just, she's kind of like eating his lunch, and I don't like what they do with him instead.
Because Dave Bautista was very unhappy with the script, wasn't he?
Yes, until he did the table read. He didn't like the direction they were taking Drax, and then when he sort of did that table read, he liked it a lot more. I'm with him. I don't really enjoy this direction for Drax.
It's that thing where they take away the emotional core of his role in the first movie, which is, my family was killed and I need to get revenge on someone, and this movie kind of like takes it away. Like, he doesn't have that drive. It's not like, I need to go get Thanos, I need to go get Thanos. Like, it'd be interesting if he had more interaction with Nebula and they were both going like, oh, we both want to go kill Thanos. We get that nice moment where him and Mantis are sat outside and he mentions his wife and daughter and that stuff. Like, I like that. They do manage to give him an emotional beat which works for him, but so much of the movie is about Drax as comedic engine, and when you already have Groot as comedic engine and Mantis as comedic engine, and you go on and on and on, and there's so many different comedic beats, Drax not working is a lot more noticeable.
Also, like, his whole thing is he's like the enforcer of the group, and they just completely take him out of that final fight, and I think that's both good and bad. I think if his character had been better throughout the movie, I would sit here and tell you it's really good that instead of having this hulking beast doing fighting at the end, he spends his final moments saving another character. And I like when he's getting buried in the planet and he's doing what he can to lift her up and stop her from being taken as well. But because the character doesn't work for me generally, it instead is like, well, you're not using him for his main thing, so he just feels absent. So you mentioned Nebula a minute ago. I really like this pairing, Nebula and Gamora. So Karen Gillan is back as Nebula, still mesmerising to look at. Didn't have to shave her entire head this time, just the sort of lower part.
Hair prosthetics have come such a long way in the 3 short years between these movies.
Indeed they have. Zoe Saldana back as Gamora. Gamora kind of has frustratingly little to do, kind of like the first one, but she's so good in everything she does. I think, kind of like I said the first time, there's a theme here. She talks about how the character is a professional, and I think that is a really good way of describing it, in that she has a really good way of just standing there and looking not impressed with the others, but not in a way that's like, why are you with them then?
I'm going to make a comparison now to Parks and Recreation,
Go
in
for it.
that both of them are very similar in that there's a lot of people in there that can carry a lot of comedy, and then you obviously cast someone as the straight woman in this. So in Parks and Recreation, you've got Rashida Jones plays Ann Perkins, and you have her as the straight woman, and Zoe Saldana is very much that here. But then the issue comes when you have people who can flip between being comedic and the straight person. The person who is exclusively there to be the straight person gets pushed to the side, and people like Star-Lord can play both comedic and serious, and Yondu can do that, and Rocket can do that. And when you have Zoe Saldana, who can tell a joke, but her strengths lie more in the dramatic, like, it becomes noticeable when you're kind of carting her away into the most dramatic plotline of it, which is like tremendously acted by both Karen Gillan and by Zoe Saldana, but feels so ostracized from the rest of the movie.
I think she is going to thrive so much more in Infinity War than she does in Guardians, or has done in Guardians so far. I think she's going to fit in really well there, and I am looking forward to seeing her interact with other characters, the likes of a Thor, a Black Widow, those sort of people, just to see how that goes for her. But, you know, their storyline here is what it is, and I do really enjoy it. I like the bickering between them. I like the delivery of "I hate you." It's not this huge declaration, it's just sort of tossed out there casually in the middle of a sentence, and I think it's really, really well done.
I love Nebula's speech about what Thanos did to her.
Yeah.
And how it was instigated by Gamora never giving up. All her hatred comes from the fact that their father was awful and he made them fight. And her sister never once let her win a fight so that she wasn't subjected to having a limb or a piece of her body ripped off.
You were the one who wanted to win. I just wanted a sister, as a heartbreaking moment from this otherwise uncaring psychopath.
I love so much of this. It's a shame it so obviously feels like this is, hey, look, we're doing Infinity War build-up. This is where the animosity towards Thanos comes, and look, conveniently, Karen Gillan's back for Infinity War, so she's going to get to do something with this. I'd be annoyed if Karen Gillan wasn't back for Infinity War and didn't get to have some kind of face-off with Thanos.
Oh, yeah.
But this part of the movie feels like this is basically setting up for Karen Gillan having 10 to 15 minutes in Infinity War in which she gets to do something.
Probably die fighting Thanos, but save Gamora.
Yeah, this is the first of two movies that end in fairly explicit ways that set up Infinity War, and I love a lot of the emotion, the emotional beats of the stuff between these two sisters is really, really good, but it also feels like it's the most out there piece of the movie. Gamora goes off into the middle of nowhere on Ego's planet, and then Nebula comes in with a spaceship, and then they spend 5 minutes fighting.
Yeah, but Gamora does pick up a giant space cannon and hold it on her shoulder in a wonderful moment.
It is. I love those bits where they remind you that, oh no, she is super strong.
She's stronger than Drax. She's the most dangerous woman in the universe, people.
But pretty much all of the scenes in which she gets to do something like that are with Nebula. Like, she doesn't prove herself really in that final fight. Most of the final stretch of the movie, she's running away and going up and like saving her sister and stuff like that, and it's good beats, but she's not involved in the main action, and it's just kind of sad that they're doing that to her, because she can obviously carry more than what they're giving her to do, because she's rocking the shit out of what they've given her to do.
You know what else she's doing? She is continuing the will they won't they story with Peter. I know this bothers some people. I think the little scene they have in the woods, like when I mentioned her getting David Hasselhoff's name wrong, I think that's really well played. She's identifying with a story that he told her and sort of finding deeper meaning into it than he meant, and like them holding hands and not realising it. I like that. But then when they're just having this out loud conversation about their unspoken connection and all that, I don't think that plays as well. Him talking about Cheers, all of this stuff. I like that she goes back to save him, obviously, or tries to. The way they end things with them, it feels very, and that's the end of Guardians of the Galaxy in some ways to me, where I'm not sure I want to see these two having relationship drama in Guardians 3.
I feel like they've done the subversion of that trope well enough with Drax and Mantis. They're acknowledging and subverting it well enough that I am happy to see them have an actual romance.
I'm sure James Gunn can pull that off. I'm sure these two actors can bring some great stuff to it. It's just some part of me just didn't want to see it happen yet. But there probably isn't going to be a Guardians 4. Or certainly probably not with these 5 characters. But It sucks that the two things she gets to do are fight with her sister and have a will they won't they with Chris Pratt. But what she gets to do, she also gets to dance. Zoe Saldana, a very well trained dancer, loves to dance, and Drax says of her, she is not a dancer. Fun stuff. Miscellaneous little factoid here. They couldn't get hold of any of the Walkman models that they wanted to. Sony did not have any. So rather than buy them for $1,800 each on eBay, I know, Propmaster just made some. And I really hope that the hours he spent doing that cost Marvel less than 3 times $1,800.
I mean, they probably did if it was a non-working... if it had to work...
No, I'm sure it didn't really work. But... Oh, and he of course gets the Zune at the end, doesn't he?
He does.
A pretty weird, but I guess funny moment.
Everyone loves a Zune joke until this movie's been rewatched in 20 years and no one has any fucking idea what a Zune is.
The audience I watched this with yesterday did not know what a Zune was, I don't think, but God, I'm old.
It's only like 10 years old now.
I know, but I remember HD DVD, I remember the Zune, I remember all these things. Peter's going to hear music that came out not quite recently, because they've been dead for a while, but I don't know, I kind of liked the idea of him not knowing any music past, like, 1985 or something.
I kind of like the idea of him trying to upload music onto his Zune in Infinity War. What do you mean this isn't supported?
I brought it all the way back to Earth. What do you mean I can't make this work? Okay, so we have a shit ton of cameos in this movie. So here we go. Laura Haddock is back as Meredith Quill. Seth Green is back as Howard the Duck. Ben Browder of Farscape, as I mentioned, is a Sovereign Admiral. Rob Zombie returns to voice one of the Ravagers. Many of the Ravagers are allegedly people worthy of Wikipedia pages. The only one that I really took note of was Steve Agee. He's a face I know.
I like him.
Yes. Jeff Goldblum is the Grandmaster in the end credits. Just took some footage of him dancing on the set of Thor Ragnarok and shoved him in here, because he is the Collector's brother in these movies. James Gunn's parents are in this movie. Also Sean Gunn's parents, weirdly enough. Presumably they're people in the town in Missouri, I would assume. Peter's grandfather back, Greg Henry playing him. Glenn Close, as I said, filmed scenes to be Nova Prime. They were all cut out. Talked about the original Guardians team. Nathan Fillion filmed scenes as Simon Williams, who goes on to become Wonder Man. That scene was cut, but according to James Gunn, it is still canonical. He wanted his buddy Nathan Fillion to have a role that could mean something and grow. I doubt we'll ever see this happen, but it was filmed. David Bowie was supposed to have a cameo before his tragic passing. That would have been really, really fun. I think he was going to be one of the original Guardians. Again, would have been a really fucking weird squad. And Stan Lee, the most strange one of them all, is confirmed, or softly confirmed, to be a Watcher. He is sitting there with the Watchers, these giant-headed, baby-like cosmic creatures who just watch over everything, and they show up when weird shit's going to go down. And he's talking about a cameo that has not happened yet in the timeline, confirming him to be a cosmic being, and it is the same character in every movie in all these cameos. That shit is wild.
Think how many movies that Stan Lee has been in. This can hypothetically tie all of them together. So get your head around there being 3 different people playing Spider-Man who have all met the same Watcher.
No, you broke my brain. Okay, I think that's everything. Have you got any other like major thoughts on this before we do our sort of closing segment?
No, I've even done too much about my distaste for the Stan Lee cameos and stuff that wasn't necessarily created by him. This one doesn't even register. Like, I'm like, cool, there's an explanation for it, I'm fine with that happening.
I've been very down on it, and I think rewatching it knocked it down at least 1 ranking on my overall thing, but it's still better than Man of Steel, let's be honest.
It's my least favourite of the movies that came out last year.
Yeah.
It's not my least favourite movie that is in Phase 3. It's certainly not my least favourite movie that they've done. As I think I've said already, I put it on a very similar level to Age of Ultron. It's a movie which has big ambitions. It's a little bit messy because it's got those big ambitions, but I think when it hits really hard.
The highs are extremely high. I just think it's just nowhere near as consistent, and a lot of it, like the shine's come off the apple. Well, it hasn't completely come off the apple, but you know, it's just not as effective the second time around, some of it, and some of the new stuff doesn't land as well. But, you know, Yondu's funeral, man. Baby Groot. All good stuff. So, we like to run these common criticisms of Marvel films past each individual one, see if they hold any weight. Villain watch. So we got Ego, and we've got Aisha and the Sovereign. Aisha and the Sovereign certainly suck. Ego, I think, starts off pretty well, but then it descends into that CG nonsense fight. I don't know. I wouldn't call him anywhere near like one of the worst ones. I also wouldn't call him one of the best ones. I would put him sort of upper middle of the ones we've had.
Yeah, if we're talking like, I think Kurt Russell is really good. I think it just has that problem that happens to a lot of superhero movies, which is it becomes a CGI slugfest that's just a little bit boring. Again, there's enough going on aside from the villain that makes it interesting. So to hop on this point, it is not as bad as... It's certainly not as bad as Lee Pace in the first Guardians of the Galaxy.
He's coming back, man. They're going to rehabilitate that character. They're going to give him pathos. It's going to be great.
This is a better villain than the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Sure.
And I think that the fact that we were as high on the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie as we were, in spite of the villain, I think is slightly less easy in this movie. But I do think that there is room to do that.
For sure. The Ravagers are kind of pretty fun as a sort of tertiary comic relief set of villains, I will say. So the third act, we kind of did this where you feel it doesn't all collapse. It's just that sort of one quick scene. And you are right, it's not all doom and gloom, it's just I cannot ever escape what that turns into, even if it is very briefly. But then it really lands strong with the Yondu stuff, so... Overall, I guess it's a good third act, it's just that's immediately where the brain goes for me.
It's a problematic third act in the way that so many of these third acts are, but again, in comparison to stuff that months ago we've watched now, it's better than stuff like Iron Man 2, it's better than stuff like Incredible Hulk. They are getting better. There is a marked improvement over what they're doing with Act 3, and even in a movie where I don't even know if I'd say Act 3 is the weakest act, because it's the act where all the characters are together, and like it's the only time we get that for any long stretch of time, even if they do keep pushing them off and stuff like that. But this is the point where Star-Lord and Yondu get to interact, and Rocket and Star-Lord, and it all comes together, and I will appreciate it for that more than anything, because we reversed the decisions to have everyone off in their own little two-man side plot for 40 minutes to an hour of the movie.
Okay, so let's close this as we always do with our outstanding performance category. We are trying to assemble a list, as it sounds, the outstanding performances in the history of the MCU. As it stands, we have 3 spare picks. But I don't think we need them, because last time with the first Guardians, we gave it a 5-way tie to the main Guardians of the Galaxy, so I can pretty confidently say they're not outperforming themselves here. I don't think anyone is outright bad, but no one is, maybe Rocket, but no one else I think is giving a better performance than they did last time. Well, not so much so that I'm willing to swap them out with their first run. So for me, it's Michael Rooker with a bullet.
Yeah, Michael Rooker is so much of what I think about this movie. He takes a role which was memorable, but was definitely not what people were talking about after they got out of it. Everyone's talking about Grit and Rocket, and then this movie, I feel like Michael Rooker has become a household name because of this.
Yeah, for sure.
I could say Michael Rooker and people would know that name rather than, like, he's not just that guy who was in a couple seasons of The Walking Dead. He is so damn good in this, and he fluctuates between drama and comedy and emotion, and it's exactly what you want to see from this kind of movie. It's really, really good. In my ranking of Marvel performances, this might be one of my favourites for a single movie performance. Like, I think
because he's got a lot more of a character arc going on for him in this one movie than as much as we have talked up a Sam Rockwell and a Ben Kingsley. This is a far more three-dimensional character with a lot more going on. Like, there is a beginning, middle, and end to this story, and we get new backstory. We get the cool expansion of the gimmick from the first one, the whistle arrow. Like, it's taken up to 11 this time, and then he goes out with this lovely funeral scene that, like I said, it really sucks that they had to do it because he's such a good character, but it's what makes sense, and it has that impact on Star-Lord. So as good as I think Sean Gunn also is here, I am not willing to sacrifice one of our spares because Black Panther is not that far away, and there's a lot of very good performances in that movie. So I would say Michael Rooker. Again,
I don't think it's the lone bright spot, but it is definitely the brightest of the spots.
No, it's certainly not the lone bright spot. I don't think anyone's bad in this. I think Drax's character has done a disservice, but I don't think it's a bad performance by Dave Bautista. I just think Michael Rooker it's the one you would talk about. But that's it. We're done. Episode 15 over. Episode 16 will be tackling Spider-Man Homecoming. This was originally going to be a much shorter episode in that myself and Mike Thomas reviewed this movie in our Spider-Man podcast, Big Spideas, which you can find at entertherealworld.com. So I was basically just going to let you talk about it for 20 minutes or something, and it would be a bonus episode. But I'm very excited to rewatch it, and I would like to apply our sort of episode formula to it. So it's going to be a full episode, but air off schedule, and if you're listening to this on the day of release, you'll probably be hearing it in about 2 days instead of a week, because that one's probably going to drop on like a Saturday or something instead of our traditional Wednesday. We will see what happens there. So Spider-Man Homecoming will be our next episode. EnterTheRealWorld.com, SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt. Check everything out. Follow Ben on Twitter. He tweets. I don't, but you can follow him at
Nquoid, Nquoid. Yeah, follow me. I'll probably plug the episode when it comes out. I will see how many more references I can get to characters being kicked into trees.
Fun fact, your Twitter handle is still easier to say than the real world one, which is why I never plug the Twitter account. We'll see you next time for Spider-Man Homecoming, and I wonder which wonderful songs from Awesome Mix Volume 2 I'll be closing the episode with.